You're listening to Bigfoot Society, and I'm Jeremiah Byron. Tonight's story isn't from a researcher or a cryptid chaser. It's from a father in the night he tried to pass on his love of the outdoors to his son. But deep in the forests of northeast Oregon, something else was waiting. Screams that shook their bones, and a shadow behind the trees, and hands, massive, gnarled hands, pulling branches apart to stare directly at them. What started as a quiet hunting trip became a night neither would ever forget. This is the story of Dee and the Bigfoot that watched from the dark, so stay with us. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Dee tonight. Dee's a listener from the great state of Oregon, and he has a few encounters to share. But how's it going tonight, Dee?
Going real good, Jeremiah.
Awesome. I'm excited to hear. I've heard a little bit about what you've experienced, but I'm going to go ahead and give it right over to you. Feel free to share what you'd like about what you experienced.
Sure. Well, I'd like to start out and give a little background. I grew up in Eastern Oregon, and I was out in the woods a lot. My grandpa was a logger, and I hunted and fished with him, and he took me everywhere out in the woods. And with the experiences I had there, at that time, very little known about Bigfoot, but never experienced anything. I've been around bears, cougars, you name it. I've had cougars within 5 feet of me. I've heard them scream. Bears have been even closer. So going into the story, I wanted to bring the same thing to my kids. And I had my son, and I took him everywhere with me. And we were out in the woods a lot getting wood. We were hunting, fishing. And this one time, him and I were going to head out hunting. My oldest brother, was going to bring his fifth wheel up in the woods, and we were going to use it. Well, my son and I decided to go early. So we went a day early, and we were just going to wait for my brother. Now, I've been out in the woods before. I've camped. I've dry camped. I've had tents. I've slept in pickups and everything else. So it was nothing unusual. If brother didn't show up, we'll just stay out in the woods. Well, we got up there, started getting dark. We were up above Wallowa. And I told him, let's stop, let's build us a fire and get something to eat. And at the time, my son was pretty close to 10 years old. He was 9 and a month to go, 9 years and a month to go. And so we sat down, we found a spot. It was a wide road, and we pulled up in this clearing, and we just kind of parked and lit us a fire and got out some stuff to eat. And we were eating in the forest. Now, what was weird, when we were there, we had our fire going, but it was just completely quiet the minute the sun went down. Not a sound. And to me, that was strange, because I hadn't encountered much of anything like that. Usually you hear something, crickets or something. You just hear something. It's just not that quiet. So we ate, and we were talking, and my son kept asking me, is Uncle David going to show up? And I said, well, he'll show up when he gets here. It's no big deal. And we talked for a couple hours just by the fire chatting. Well, about 9:30 at a distance. Now, if I had to guess, I'd hate to guess because there's lots of draws around there in canyons, and something can sound far away and it's not far away, or you hear it and it sounds like it's close, but it's far away. It's just the way the sound echoes through those draws. And we heard something, a scream. And I'll tell you, once I heard a Bigfoot scream, I said, that was it. That was it. Just, oh my goodness, loud, but far away. My son looks up at me with these big eyes, and he says, Dad, what is that? I said, don't worry about it. Just, I don't know, animal hollering, no big deal. Now, if you could have looked inside of me, you would have seen me going, "Oh man, what is that? This is awesome and scary at the same time because you don't know what it is. I mean, it's pure darkness around us." So he kind of says, "Well," I said, "it's far away anyway. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal." So we were talking some more, and it was pretty close. And the reason I know the times is I was waiting for my brother, so I kept looking at my watch. But about a half hour to an hour later, somewhere in there, another scream came. And it was just absolutely positive the same scream as the Bigfoot ones I've heard. And I was just, and he looked at me this time and he says, "Dad, this is scaring me." I said, "Don't worry about it. We're fine. There's nothing out here going to get us." And of course, inside I was saying, "It's getting closer." And my first thought was, let's get out of there. Something inside me just didn't want to stay. And I thought, no, we just gotta stay here because I want to meet my brother up there. And it was 11:30 because I looked at my watch. It was 11:30. And that thing was right across the road and it screamed. And right now, even talking about it, I get chills up my back. It was horrendous. And my son jumped up and he almost started crying. He wanted to get in the truck. I says, "Well, let's get in the truck and we'll drive down to town." And you could hear it rustling in the brush a little bit, not real loud, but rustling. But that scream, like I said, I've been around cougar screams, and never, ever have I had chills up my spine like that. And it was so loud. So we got in the truck, and I started up the truck, and we made a loop around to get turned around to go out the road. Well, the trees weren't that far away from the road. If I had to say, it was about 50 yards. But we turned around, and when our headlights came across that, there was hands and the top of a head looking through a couple of the trees. It was just, I stopped for a second and looked just because I'm not seeing this, am I? And my son just looked at me. He says, "Dad, let's get out of here. That thing's huge." You saw the hands, and they had two trees split apart, two smaller trees. They were pretty close to. When I stood under them, because we went up the next day, but I stood under them. I was not even halfway, so they were probably 10 to 11 feet tall. He had them spread apart, was looking through them. And then when we sat there for a few minutes, the hands went back and the trees were swaying, and we got out of there. And at first, I wanted to stay. I wanted to see more, but then I thought, for the safety of my son, I got to protect the kids more than anything. And when it comes to wild animals, you don't really know what they're going to do. I don't trust them. Don't trust wild animals whatsoever, because they can be really good, but then they can turn on you. So anyway, he saw that. My son had tears in his eyes because he was just, I think he was going into shock myself. And we got down to town and down into the town and pulled off somewhere. And, neither one of us slept that night to wake up the next morning to go hunting. And my brother finally made it up, and we went back up in the woods to where we were camped. And like I said, I walked across the road and stood by those trees that were right next to the road. And I was a midget to those trees. And when I looked up to see how high they were, and the thing had to be 9 to 10 feet tall, if not a little taller. and started scouring for tracks. And there was, the ground was real hard, but the tall grass. The only thing you could see was the pathway to where it came in. And I took my son with me, and we tracked it. We tracked the walking as far as we could. And I'm no amateur at tracking. I'm not an expert, but I've tracked a lot of game. And we actually followed it to where it went up over the hill and then went down into this draw. And we never found, there was never a good track. Like I said, the ground was pretty hard, but you could see the grass being laid over. And the only reason I say I know it was a Bigfoot was because the grass that was laid over was huge compared to my foot. I tried to show my son. I said, "See, you put your foot down," and he says, "Well, yeah, but yours is only half of what that one is." I said, "That's what I'm saying. I know what we saw, and I know what we were following." And we tracked it down as far as I wanted to go because it got real thick and steep, and you could see through the brush where the grass was, where it was laid down, and you could see it where it went down into the draw. Well, the biggest thing about this was, number one, I wasn't looking for Bigfoot, and number two is it was the least expected thing I would ever see. I wasn't prepared to see it. As far as like we're out hunting Bigfoot, we were out deer hunting, or going to be deer hunting the next day or two. And I think that's what surprised me the most. And in the area that we saw it in, what was it doing there? There's so many people out in the woods at that time, and it was just a strange occurrence. And I know that I'll never forget it. That's exactly, never forget it. That was the hands. I saw the fingers. I didn't see thumbs. I just saw the fingers holding the trees back. Just looking through them. And the hands were just huge, were dark colored, but had wrinkles on the knuckles, just like a human. And the top of the head was covered with hair. It was just hairy. And the thing was just, I can't imagine how tall it was, because it had to be 10, 11 feet tall. And I was shook up, I think, just as much as my son, but I wasn't showing him. I didn't want him scared of the woods, is the main thing. And that's the last thing I wanted him to be scared to go out in the woods. But we followed it. I looked for tracks, couldn't find anything. Nothing tracked to where you could do any casts or anything. But it had a big stride. Now, this is, like I said, with the grass laid over. It was just almost 3 strides of mine, which my stride is exactly 3 feet. And so his stride was about 6 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot strides. And that was all we saw the whole time we were up there, because I was hoping to see it again, but never did.
So we're in Northeast Oregon, and did you say north of Wallowa?
Wallowa.
Okay.
The city of Wallowa, yeah.
Is this in like a wildlife area or a state park, or?
No, there's a lot of federal Forest Service up there, and it used to be a lot of it owned by Boise Cascade, but I think they sold it to a land company, Hancock or something. But it's mainly, public. Anybody in the public can get up in it. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. Scott in the Patreon, he's got a question, and It's a good one. What was your relation to the concept of Bigfoot? Were you a Bigfoot believer before this event happened?
I think I'd put it this way. I was and wasn't. Okay, I got an open mind, always did. And I first remember my grandpa having some type of wildlife magazine where they had the film from, gosh, I can't think of it now. Or they had a picture from the Patterson-Gimlin film about Bigfoot. Well, I read the article, but I looked at my grandpa and says, "Hey, Grandpa, what do you think about Bigfoot?" "There ain't no Bigfoot." That's all he said. But then I started learning more about it as I went along. And even back then, they didn't have much on it. There was a few books out there. And of course, I went to the library and got a few books and read about it. But the way I looked at it was, I got an open mind, but until I see it, I'm not going to believe it fully. I saw it. I believe it. So I wasn't a full believer, but I wasn't a total skeptic either, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And this wasn't like you and your son were like, okay, we're going on a Bigfoot hunt. Like you were just trying to get out and enjoy nature, and this just happened to happen.
And that's the whole thing about it. And that's why I think sometimes when anybody, whether it be me or anybody else, sometimes I think when we go out looking for Bigfoot, I don't think I've not seen one go out there looking for it. All mine have happened when I'm not out there Bigfoot hunting. I'm just out in the woods enjoying some time. And that's the thing that got me the most, because this wooded area I'm talking about, I started hunting and getting wood with my grandpa when I was 8 years old. And I'd been through all those woods with him. He logged them all. So he took me everywhere up in there, all over. There wasn't a bit of that country I didn't see. And I figured, well, it's too close to a town. It's probably 30 miles to the nearest town out of the woods. But, it's kind of close to town, so you'd never see a Bigfoot out here. That was kind of my thought growing up. And I even started hunting at 8 years old with my grandpa, and he's put me out on walks and said, "Walk down this hill and I'll meet you down at the road," type thing, where nowadays I wouldn't have let my kids do it because I'd be too scared to get lost. But it was not the perfect setting to go find Bigfoot. We weren't 30 miles or 40 miles back in the wilderness where nobody goes. This is where people are, which really had me just had me amazed at the chance I had to see it.
Oh, absolutely. Man, D, I think there's a chance your grandpa probably saw something at one time or another. I just have a feeling, but I'm just kind of guessing. But.
Well, I'm thinking he started logging out in the woods in 1930 and got his own logging company in 41 and sold out in 69. I believe he was doing what I was doing to my son. And I think he was wanting to not make me scared to go out in the woods. He knew if I told him, yeah, there's Bigfoot out there, they're big. You never know what's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. At 8 years old or so, I would have been scared to go out in the woods. I was scared to death.
Yeah. He probably was doing something like that. Yeah, I could definitely see that. But what year again was this that you and your son had the experience?
It was 1997.
Okay. Thinking back to when you saw the head and the fingers, did you get a chance to see like what kind of the shape of the head was at all, or did you remember anything that you saw about the head for details?
The head part I saw was just covered with hair. If I remember right, it had a little bit of a cone shape, but it wasn't prominent. It wasn't like a pyramid sitting on somebody's head, but it was raised a little bit. But like I said, with the hands, I was concentrating on the hands because I could see them just clear as day. I mean, they were wrapped around the tree, pulling these two small trees apart. And I know it was looking over him, but I just caught it when I came around with the lights and stopped to where he had enough time to put it up over his face. But yeah, I didn't really, I saw the hair and it looked like maybe a cone shape, but I was looking at the hands because they were just right out there in the open, more or less.
The screams, you said you've heard this, you heard the screams a few times.
God.
Are those, can you describe, there's a few different, we hear the Bigfoot sounds on the different types of media. There's different types. Is there any way you can kind of describe maybe what type of scream, or is it like Ohio howl or anything like that?
Well, I'm trying to think. It kind of mimicked some of this. There's a couple sounds on, I think, Finding Bigfoot that they had tapes of that were really close.
Okay.
Not exact, but it was the low tone, or it was high, then low, and then kind of low, high again. It was just kind of but it was the duration that killed me, because usually a coyote, they'll howl when it's a few seconds. This seemed like it was for about 8 to 10 seconds, and it was a loud scream, loud. And it wasn't like a cougar scream either. And I've heard them plenty of times. And it was nothing even close. Too short of a call. A cougar is too short of a call to match this. All I know is when it got across the road and it screamed, every hair on my body stood up. It didn't shake you, but you were physically shaking of just hearing that scream that close. It was awesome. Now I think it's awesome. Back then I was scared to death. But
your son is around 35 right now, I think, if I do the math. Yeah. How did this affect him later in life as an adult, if it did?
You know what? It hasn't. He does bushcraft, survival things. Go out in the woods and with his knife and a hatchet sometimes, and just stay for 3 or 4 days out in the woods, just living off the land and what's there. It didn't affect him in a way. In fact, I think it made it the other way. Now he's not afraid and he wants to find it, type thing. So it actually did good instead of bad.
That is extremely interesting. So I'd guess he's probably out in Oregon doing his thing, bushcrafting out there.
Yeah, he lives in the southern part of Oregon.
Southwest.
Yeah, he's actually, now that I never thought of it that way, but it's kind of went the opposite way. And he's not afraid of anything. He just wants to see it again. He just, well, if I see it, I see it, Dad. I says, yeah, we all will. Hopefully someday again. But
that's really, really interesting. If he ever does have any encounters, keep me in mind for sure. So now I'll let you continue with what happens next, which the listeners are probably like, okay, what happens next?
Yeah, and this was awesome. I mean, that it's the few occasions I've had that this was incredible, and I was thrilled. But now jump forward to 2007. We were we decided the wife wanted to take up some hunting, so I took her up there to go hunting. And so we get up there, pitch our tent, and get all camp set up. And we have a cabin tent that's 10 by 12, and it's 7.5 feet tall. So we could stand up in our tents and everything. So it's just her and I and the dogs. So we had, I think, 4 dogs at that time. And they were 4 Chihuahuas, believe it or not. And we got up there the first night, and like I said, it was again quiet. It was just, the forest was too quiet. No coyotes, no nothing. Kind of strange, but oh well, we just went about our way. The first night was just nothing. Nothing happened. Second night, nothing happened. And then the third night, it was quiet again. And we got done with the fire, got done with dinner, and we decided that, well, it's time to go to bed. And it was supposed to rain that night. So we took a tarp and laid it over half the tent on the back side and halfway over the front, so that we could still get out the front of the tent without messing with the tarp. Well, the wind blew, and it blew the tarp off the tent, of course. And this was later. I was getting ready for bed, so I said, oh, well, if it rains, I guess we'll hope the tent's waterproof, whatever. I'm tired. But we were sitting there, and I was getting ready for bed. And on the tarp, you heard a footstep. And the tarp crinkled, and then crinkled again. And I'm going, I looked at my wife and said, shh, be real quiet. There's something out there. She goes, oh, it's probably someone just messing there. It's the cows, because there were some cows around camp. And I says, if a cow was stepping on that tarp, you'd hear all 4 legs. You'd hear all 4 feet. I've been worked on a cow ranch for a while. You can hear cows coming. I know their steps. This is not a cow. So just sat real quiet. And it kept coming around. And it kept coming around the side of the tent, real slow. But you could hear it. My wife says, is it a bear? And I says, no, it's not a bear. This is something else. So I just sat there. And as I was listening, it made its way around to the front of the tent, which was kind of strange. And I thought, well, my first thought was maybe someone's out there messing with us. And I just stayed there and watched. I did have a shotgun in the tent with me, and I thought, well, I'll just wait and see what's going on. And it kind of was like those creep shows, like maybe what's going to happen next, what's going on, because you heard it walk all the way around in the front of the tent. And all of a sudden, up on clear on the top of the tent, not far from the center, probably maybe 6 to 8 inches from the center, you see a finger scratching the tent, like they're feeling it. And you could see the finger through, not through the tent, but the way the tent folds, with tents, that nylon. And it was scratching the tent, like feeling something or something. And I looked at my wife and I says, well, enough's enough. And I think I racked the shotgun and I heard it run off. So wife says, well, somebody's messing. I said, you saw that? And she goes, yeah, I did. I said, that was a finger, because it pushed down on the tent and rubbing it, like scratching it with its fingernail. And she says, yeah, I did. I saw it. No big deal. I says, no, that was Bigfoot. And she says, no, it wasn't. I says, yeah, it was, because we'd seen him up here before. And I says, that was him. And she goes, I don't think so. So the next morning, well, we went out hunting that morning, but came back early. And of course, I went looking for tracks, and I could find some. It was dusty where we were at. I could see some dust spurred up, but I couldn't really make out nothing but maybe a heel track, maybe a heel print, part of the heel. So then I thought, okay, I've got to try this. I went over to the tent, and if that was somebody's finger, they had to be pretty tall, because I'm only 5'9", 5'10", and I couldn't even hardly reach up over I could just reach over the edge of the tent. Okay, that's far from the head. Now this thing's 10 foot in length, that tent is. And it was reaching halfway over, 7 foot high, 6 foot over. And I grabbed a stick, and I said, now you get in the tent and you look up. So I took a stick, put it down on there and moved it. She goes, that's not even close to what it was. And so I tried different things to see if I was being messed with. And I couldn't do the same thing that we saw. And I told her, I says, this is the same thing that happened before. The forest was quiet. For those 3 or 4 days, the forest was just dead quiet at night. No coyotes, no nothing. And it's the same area. And I just come to the conclusion that it just happens when you least expect it. Because that Bigfoot was the last thing on my mind while we were up there. But when I heard it walk around that tent, I mean, it's almost you could feel it, but you couldn't see it, and you could hear it. And just the steps, it was like it was sneaking up, because you could just hear it hit that thing. And to reach over across the top of that tent, there's no way anybody could have done that without falling in on the tent, even if they were standing on something. But that was the second experience in the same area, just 10 years later.
Gee, that is wild. So after that, was that enough? So you're like, I'm not going back there anymore? Or is it a thing where I might go back there again someday?
No, it came to the point to where it was, I'm going back there again.
Okay.
I got excited. That time I got excited. I had the dogs and the wife with me, but I was like, I'm not crazy. Okay. That was kind of my thing. It was like in my own brain, I'm not crazy. There is actually something up here, and it's Bigfoot. And I want to see it again.
Would you go back there again for a third time?
Oh yeah. To have one more experience.
Yeah.
I think it would be worth it. Now, do I want to keep my distance? Yeah, I really don't want to come face to face with her. I mean, I do and I don't. Like I said, it's an animal. You don't know what might happen. I like the distance, but I am not afraid. I'm more curious than afraid to see it again. I want to see more of it. People that have actually seen their faces, that type of thing. I'd love to experience that part, but it hasn't made me scared to go in the woods at all. It's made me more curious.
Absolutely. Would you be able to mark on a map the general area where this happened? I feel like there's got to be other people that have experienced stuff in the same area.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can. I can mark it on the map and send it to
Yeah.
you.
I have a feeling that would be great. Scott's a good guy. He's got a very similar way of thinking as I do. So we both have the same question. Do you know if there's been stories of other sightings or activity in that area, either prior to you camping there or afterwards?
I haven't heard of much activity, but
Okay.
I'll tell you, people over there really don't talk about it.
Mm,
Uh, uh, if they would, people think they're crazy. It's the old way of thinking. I think it's just like my grandpa was.
yep.
I mean, they just don't talk about those things. You guys are crazy, blah blah blah. I do know of a couple of reports back then that happened in the Minam Canyon, which is where those reports took place, that I could find out or understand where they were at, was probably, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 miles away. So, I mean, it's not an outreach of them moving that far. And I'm kind of on the, I don't know, my theory, if I could say it, uh, is that I think they move around. I think they almost, a small migration, I don't think they're going from Alaska to California. I don't really think they're going that far. But I think they have their high ground and then they have their low ground and travel with the food. I really believe. And where we camped at is kind of the mid range between high and low. And I kind of wondered if it was around in October, um, early October. And I almost wondered if they weren't starting to move down from their high ranges. And it was just kind of a migration path, my theory.
Were both times in October?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, they were. Because I hunted in those woods, but also my son and I went up there and did some hiking. We'd go up there and just do some scouting around, just hiking. Never saw anything, never had any interaction, never felt anything. Because sometimes if you've been out in the woods enough, you kind of feel things. Like, maybe we should go down there, or you got a gut feeling that maybe that's not a good place to go. We hiked all over up there. I never got that feeling of something's there, something's, watching us or anything. But that's what kind of amazed me, because I'd been in the woods and been around those woods so much, and then have both these things happen in the same place. It was kind of shocking, because the 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 last thought in my mind, I'd ever be able to have those experiences that close to where I was living. I was living in La Grande at the time, but now it's in my area. I don't have to read books about it being in Washington, California, and place else. It's right up there. And of course, as my son got older, we'd go looking for it, but we never found anything.
Oh, so that is very interesting. So the times that you weren't looking, but the times that you were, that's very interesting.
And that's why I've told some people that I've talked to, they say, well, I want to find Bigfoot. Let's go Bigfoot hunting. I says, you'll never find it. I says, you need to go into the places not expecting it and not be prepared for it. And I said, that's when you see it. That's when it all happens. And that's what's happened every time. And I saw now when I go out in the woods, I hide the cameras and everything. So I'm not expected to see Bigfoot, but I'm sure going to get a picture of it this time.
Yeah, you see, you're good to go. You have a camera with you and maybe even audio recorder. Who knows? But yeah, that's cool.
Audio recorder and then what was it about? I guess it's been 10 years. Finally got night vision, and that's been real handy. So I'm not the richest fellow. I can't afford the all the fancy toys they have for Bigfoot hunting. So, someday I'll have them.
Well, Dee, it has been a really interesting chat about an area I haven't really talked to a lot of people about. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of this interview. Just wanted to take a minute to say thank you truly for listening to this episode of the Bigfoot Society podcast. Dee's story sticks with you not just because of the towering creature in the woods, but because of the quiet fear, the awe, and the raw emotion of a father trying to protect his son from something he couldn't explain. So huge thanks to Dee for opening up about these unforgettable nights in the Wallowa woods and reminding us that Bigfoot encounters don't always happen to those who go looking. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to us on YouTube, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any new episodes, and share this one with a friend who's into Bigfoot, Oregon, or real wilderness encounters. If you're listening to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you're following the show there. And if you'd be willing to leave us a review, it helps more folks find us. If you or someone you know has had a Bigfoot encounter, especially in eastern Oregon near Wallowa, LeGrand, or the surrounding forest lands, I'd love to hear from you. So shoot me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com and let's talk. Thanks again for being part of the Bigfoot Society. And until next time, keep your eyes open, trust your gut, and never stop asking what else might be out there. See you in the woods.